has finally come when we finally get to talk about Attack on Titan. And before I start, I know it's been a while. I've been traveling, then got sick, then I recorded for this video twice. But because it's been such a long time since I watched particularly the first two seasons, really first three seasons of Attack on Titan, I forgot a lot. So had to do a little homework. Now re-recording for the third time. And hopefully this time I don't look weird. But anyways, hi, it's M. If you are new here, welcome. I review mostly anime right now. I don't know if I will venture into any niche Netflix shows or movies, or maybe something on Prime. That'll be a bit farther into the future. Right now, I just review anime that I happen to watch and like, and or I'm currently watching and like. So, but today we're going to talk about season 1 of Attack on Titan. And I didn't want to do this as a regular review recap because Attack on Titan is a pretty popular anime. If you're watching this video or any of my following videos, I'm going to assume you've watched the entire season. I feel like there's no reason to really recap what happened in Attack on Titan. We all saw it. So this will be more of a reflection series where I pick out one or two features of each season and basically do a reflection video analysis on those particular themes or aspects. And if you're here for a spoiler-free review, one, I don't know why, but two, here it is. It's about a bunch of kids who join the military and fight Titans. That's it. That's your spoiler-free review. Don't be up in my comments saying I spoiled it for you. I will hear nothing of it. I gave you a warning. This is your warning. I gave it within the first 2 minutes for sure. Maybe even the first minute of this video. So without further ado, let's dive into season 1 of Attack on Titan, a reflection on the loss of Innocence. So when Wall Maria was first breached in Attack on Titan, we as the viewers already knew this was about to be a life-altering story for our main characters, Eren, Armin, and Mikasa. Once we saw the Titan as the main antagonist, at least at first, we're automatically picturing the story as the sort of warlike adventure, but with these humanoid Titans. And we even got this feeling with the opening theme of season 1, at least the first half of season 1 of Attack on Titan. As a side note, I do want to do sort of an informal, off-the-cuff tier list of all the opening themes for Attack on Titan from season 1 all the way to the finale. That definitely won't be in this video. That will probably be in the last video I do, or next to last video when I do season 4. But also, let's all come together and agree that the rumbling will be number 1. Okay? Still in my head. Song's still in my head. I listen to it all day. Anyways, back to the reflection. However, what we sort of forget along the way is that all of this happened when Eren, Armin, and Mikasa are still kids. The day Wall Maria is breached and the day that Eren's mom was eaten alive forever altered their childhoods and immediately catapulted them into this era of war. What's more is that with this war against Titans now in place, we see how that affects Eren, Armin, and Mikasa's futures. Being automatically indoctrinated against the Titans, which is more than fair considering the damage they just suffered, but also basically enlisting into the military when they're older, but still underage. I think they're like 12 or 13 at the time that they enlist in the cadets. But of course, what we eventually find out is that this isn't just a war story where these kids basically have to become child soldiers against an external force, but this is actually setting up to be a tragedy of the loss of innocence. So a bit about Wall Maria, the wall that was first breached in season 1 of Attack on Titan. Wall Maria was part of a 3-wall border boundary system that included Wall Maria, which was the outermost wall, Wall Rose, and Wall Sheena, which is where the king resides. So with these 3 walls, we sort of see that these boundaries, these borders were never just physical barriers, they were also psychological. We see this illusion of safety with Eren, Armin, and Mikasa before Wall Maria's breach, with Eren in the most vulnerable position one could be in, sleeping under a tree, that is, until Mikasa wakes him to collect firewood and go back home. That's literally how season 1, episode 1 of Attack on Titan starts. And within what appeared to be another normal day, they run into Armin, help him after some closed-minded bullies were beating him for reading and sharing what he read. But the three did meet up, and we get to see this flashback of Eren and Armin mainly talking about visiting the outside world as Mikasa listens on. We see this aspiration to see and go beyond primarily with Armin, who shows Eren these different things, basic things really, like animals and maybe some notable people in some of the books that his family has passed down to him. And even though Mikasa had already been through a traumatic childhood, when her parents were killed and she was briefly kidnapped by these violent CD robbers who were planning to sell her because she was half Asian and one of the few, if not remaining Asians, and therefore very valuable. So they were planning to sell her underground, but were stopped when Mikasa was rescued by Eren and his dad, Grisha Jaeger. But she too was able to eventually feel this sense of safety once more with Eren and his family, at least for a year before Wall Maria's breach. The show itself doesn't talk about this until a little later in season 1, but I figured it was better to bring it up at the top of this reflection. This is showing that Wall Maria and the Shiganshina district that they were originally in weren't just physical barriers or borders, once again, but they were psychological as well in providing what we now see as this false sense of security. And the other aspect of these barriers being in place is that, at least as far as Eren, Armin, and Mikasa and the rest of the town are concerned, these barriers have been in place for about 100 years in order to protect their society from the Titans. So it's not that they don't know about these Titans, but it was more so a thing that was out of sight, out of mind, for a few generations at least, which lulled not only the kids, but the entire district into this false sense of security. The breach of Wall Maria and the fall of the Shiganshina district wasn't just a random Titan attack as it first appeared, it also showed the symbolic collapse of trust and what we saw, at least through Eren's eyes, as established authority. Wall Maria's breach left the town of Shiganshina in a very chaotic state with a societal vacuum, where the surviving citizens were now basically refugees venturing further into Wall Rose and into the Tross district. Additionally, the remaining citizens from the Shiganshina district were at the mercy of the only visible authoritative figures who were in the different branches of the military, so mainly the garrison and the military police, but also a bit of the scout regiment as well. And we see this when some of the citizens were more so voluntold than asked to help the military keep the Titans from coming through the breach as this sort of volunteer force. But this was actually a method of population control because all them people died, and therefore the food rations were no longer in danger of running out so soon because of this huge influx of refugees. But we also see in each of the trio how their innocence crumbled with the wall. Eren becomes radicalized from his idealist views into more of this zealot who wants to kill all the Titans, although he always seemed to have this sort of very extreme view of justice, which we see in the flashback when he killed two of the men who killed Mikasa's family and attempted to kidnap her to sell, which I'm not mad at, but I'm just mainly observing. But Eren's shift makes sense because he did watch his mom get eaten alive, and his dad also mysteriously disappeared only after it seemed that his dad left him with the key to something in their basement with some cryptic instructions. Mikasa does what we'll later see is what she tends to do in traumatic times and faces these feelings very internally while outwardly suppressing them most of the time. When it comes to anything Eren related, that composure is damn near non-existent. I'm not judging at all. Girl, I get it. Love can make you act outside of yourself sometimes, so understandable. Armin goes into this state where he's basically paralyzed with fear and anxiety, so he freezes. But the series does make a point in showing him powering through pretty much each time despite these crippling feelings. So because these kids were now indoctrinated into fighting an entire war, we see how training for the cadets changed Eren, Armin, and Mikasa's lives on a fundamental level. Their training arcs for the cadets and eventual scout regiment introduced a new normal and a new sense of stability for their lives on the heels of tragedy. However, while this training was in a way necessary to return the trio and some of the other kids who had heard of the tragedy that occurred at Wall Maria, this sense of stability, it was still a form of manipulation by forcing everyone to push it to their limit, as military training typically does, juxtaposed with the reminders of what they were fighting for, which honestly at this point is revenge, because the Titans did rip away all sense of stability and security from this town and pretty much everyone's way of life. And while Eren, Armin, and Mikasa are steadily making strides within the cadets, it's at the detriment of not only their childhood innocence, which is already pretty damaged, if not at this point done for, but also at the detriment of their basic humanity. But I think the reality of this doesn't really hit until the cadets are in one of their first battles after training in Trost District, where not only do they see their comrades get killed pretty quickly by the Titans, but Eren and Armin face death after a Titan tries to eat Armin after it pretty much decimated all of Armin's squad. Eren saves Armin at the last minute, and then Eren faces death himself when that Titan seemingly, well, no, he did swallow him. However, it's at this moment where Eren and the others realize that he is actually a Titan himself. And this revelation brings about a whole complicated stream of reactions, mostly distrust, because it's great that Eren's still alive at this point, but now he's one of the things that he and the other cadets have been raised to hate and fight and kill. So there's instantly this level of distrust, which further complicates what the scouts are supposed to know and who they're supposed to be fighting against. But this also presents a unique opportunity because, as we see Commander Dot Pixis and other senior leaders later realize, they now have a fighter titan on their side with Eren and can use him as basically this war machine. Still minor, by the way. I think he's like 15 by now. So by the second half of season 1, no character really knows what the right thing to do is, because the narrative has started to deconstruct that concept and the concept of innocence entirely. So the cadets in Eren's class have officially graduated and have chosen their branches, being the Scout Regiment, the Garrison, or the Military Police. And most of the main characters that we'll see from here on out for the rest of the series chose to join the Scout Regiment with Eren, all except for Annie Leonhardt, who we'll get to more in a bit. As the Scout Regiment continues to decide on what to do with Eren as far as determining whether he's a threat and working with him and sort of experimenting with and on him to further refine him as the Spider Titan, the Scouts discover that not everyone can be trusted within their rank. This is realized with the emergence of the female Titan, who seemed to be just another random variant Titan that appeared on one of the Scout Regiment's scouting expeditions. However, upon investigation and a lot of fighting and a lot of dying, it's revealed that this female Titan is actually, you guessed it, Annie Leonhardt, the fellow cadet who joined the Military Police and who actually was behind the deaths of several cadets, including Marco, and like at least 50 older members of the Scout Regiment. Annie's revelation as the female Titan who was working against the cadets was only the first of a few betrayals, which we'll get to when we talk about in season 2. But it was another notch at the loss of this sense of innocence and camaraderie. Camaraderie especially because Annie killed pretty much all of Levi's squad when they were on the scouting mission to protect Eren. And as Eren began to really learn how to put his faith in other members of the regiment and sort of rebuild his faith, they all died within like 2 episodes. So, as you can imagine, there seems to be a point where with Annie's revelation, we start to ask, what's going on and why is this soldier, better yet, this minor, this child soldier, positioning herself to betray the military in the mission of repairing the walls and retaking Wall Maria in particular. The build for the first season of Attack on Titan is really just this tearing down of safety and security for our main characters. The status quo of Shiganshina is eliminated when the Colossal Titan and the Armored Titan broke through Wall Maria that day. As a quick side note, just a question for the chat. So on the second watch of season 1, I realized that knowing what I know now, the Armored Titan looked very obvious. Like, did people catch that the first time with the hair? We'll get to it more in season 2, but did anybody catch with the hair? Particularly, it was a very specific stuff. Okay, moving on. Eren sees just how fleeting life is, especially the life of a soldier, and even someone who Eren thought to have this common bond with while training in the cadets ended up betraying him and his fellow soldiers. So in this first season of Attack on Titan, we see Eren lose his sense of moral clarity. He's gone from having some sense of righteousness, albeit extreme righteousness, when he helped Mikasa as a kid, to being driven purely by revenge after the fall of Shiganshina and watching his mom get eaten alive by what we currently in season 1 know as the Smiling Titan. And from then on, especially because the military offered refuge and training, he was driven by this very violent sense of rage and revenge. Additionally, the indoctrination that everyone wound up facing didn't just come from the state and specifically the military, but it also came from these more subtle instances of silence. They weren't in a position to question a lot of the things that took place or why the military was structured in a certain way. They really couldn't afford to question a lot, to be honest. Tradition, that again, they mainly followed the military's traditions in order to give them the best chance at succeeding and taking part in the effort to get rid of the Titans. And fear. Yes, these kids were militarized, but they were already in this form of survival mode because they saw with their own eyes that there were Titans destroying their way of life. And this additional fear after Eren was revealed to be a Titan that sort of informed everyone's reactions to be this sense of distrust. Eren being revealed to be the one thing the military was fighting against made a lot of the older soldiers and some of the senior leaders have this extremely high level of fear and distrust. And Eren, Armin, and Mikasa specifically had this similar high level of fear and distrust after being threatened a couple of times by some of the mid to senior leaders in the military. That said, Eren and the others would come to learn that the world outside the walls might actually be alluding to worse than what they were used to within the walls. So this desire and dream of freedom might have actually been shaped more by a false hope that a sort of utopia or enlightenment existed outside the walls. While we did get a lot of world building and setup in the first season of Attack on Titan, I think we also got this story of how the children who were a part of the story lost the ability to believe in a safe and stable world. Now that we've seen that so far, Eren and Annie also had the ability to turn into Titans, we see how they're fundamentally changing, but not with the benefit of gaining more stability. It's not just them who've gone through this change, because we also see this with Armin and Mikasa as well, albeit on a more subtle level. So I think with all that we've been introduced to in the first season of Attack on Titan is that this group of kids weren't just in the process of fighting Titans, but they were also somehow in the process of fighting the ghosts of who they used to be and who they could have been had this not happened at all. So yeah, that was my season 1 reflection of Attack on Titan. Let me know in the comments what you thought about season 1, whether you caught this narrative of the death of Innocence in season 1. I'm not quite sure what theme we're going to talk about yet in season 2. Maybe it's betrayal, but I'll definitely let you know in the coming days. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And let me know in the comments after I finish reflecting on this anime, what other anime you might want me to cover. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.